Good evening, everyone. My name is Marios Avraamides, and I want to thank Joanna for inviting me to present here at this class of the Center of Entrepreneurship of the University of Cyprus. And I will talk about a topic that I like a lot, but it's a topic that doesn't really fall within my research, the official research interest. So the topic I like to discuss with people and hear other people's opinions. So I will ask you things during the presentation if you don't mind, but I'll try to finish early and maybe we can discuss a few things afterwards. So in the introduction I made in Greek before we switched to English, I said, ask people whether they are involved in startups or they are involved in football, just to know what kind of examples that I will give. But I'll start with something that relates to football. I have an interest in football. I am a football fan. I am involved in the management of a team here in Cyprus, and I'm also part of a company that works on cognitive training for football players. And as a result, every now and then, when I see in the media interviews from football players, I get to read them. I generally don't read interviews, but I like to read the interviews of football players just to see what kinds of things motivate them, what their aims are, and how they think about things. And every now and then, most of the time though, I see quotes like the one you see from Paulo Coelho. This actually for many years was the quote that would always appear in interviews. Now they're a bit more sophisticated lately, but the message remains the same. So these are all quotes about positive thinking and how you can achieve things if you try really hard. And I understand that if you are an athlete, you need to think this way. But this is not something that everyone agrees with. And there is the opposite view. And here's another quote from a guy called Arthur Schopenhauer, a German philosopher, where he argues that all we do is try to satisfy our needs and our necessities, and we work hard to satisfy those needs. And when we achieve them, we're actually bored. And he goes as far as to say that human life must be some kind of mistake. So this is a rather pessimistic view of how things work. And if you contrast it with what Paulo Coelho have said later, actually, you get these two kinds of approaches, the more optimistic one, and you got the more pessimistic one of Schopenhauer. And I want to ask you, well, which one do you prefer? Are you more like Paulo kind of people or more like Arthur kind of people? Let me show a show of hands. Who's more for Paulo Coelho and positive thinking? All right. Who's Schopenhauer kind of people? Oh, we've got pessimists here. Okay. All right. So it's going to be a hard game, and we'll see how it goes on from now on. Just to give some credit to Schopenhauer, first I should say that Schopenhauer was an old, grumpy guy, even when he was young. That's the description we get about him. At some point, he actually threw his landlady down the stairs because she was speaking too loudly, and he ended up paying compensation for the rest of her life. And then he was happy when she died, and he didn't have to pay money. So he was a bit of an asshole, to be honest, but he came up with something that I think makes kind of sense. He argued that when we go on about our lives and we follow our aims, we try to achieve as much as we can. So we try to move upwards. But there are external things that happen by just luck and fortune that might drive us away from these aims. So our life is just a struggle of us trying to get somewhere, and then we have luck pushing us the other way around. And you might have examples from your life when that happens. My example is that my initial aim was to become an accountant, and I ended up being a psychology professor. So it's not a bad thing, but it's much far away from my initial aims. And I'll come back to that, to this idea of fortune, of luck playing a big role in our life. Now, if we accept that luck plays a big role, the question in what we're trying to aim, the question is, should we think big? Should we try to change the world and make big plans if not everything is under our control? What do you think? Should we think big? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. This is actually what, if you're starting a company, this is what investors want to hear. Let's say they want us to think big, have this nice business plan, a nice exit strategy, and things like that. And this is, I think, what we generally do. We like to live our lives and follow our dreams and our aims. And luckily, we do have examples that we can follow. We have in mind people that actually thought big and they managed to achieve things. And I know lots of names come into your mind. Just try to pick a couple. Steve Jobs, for example, undoubtedly did something that changed the world in terms of technology. And this guy gave us a very heartwarming story. He started as an immigrant, poor immigrant in Greece, selling CDs on the street, ended up winning the NBA finals. And his story is really inspiring. So we have a lot of examples of people who actually thought big and managed to achieve the goals. The problem, though, is that these are people that are outliers. So these are the exceptions to the rule. These are the people who made it, but there are many people who actually didn't make it. I can imagine many other poor immigrants in Greece or somewhere else dreamed of becoming NBA champions, and none of them has made it. And this happens because we get to know the successes, we get to know about the people who made it big, but we don't know much about the rest of the people. And you get to see that if you think about things like this. If you see in the newspapers and the media, you get pictures of people who won the lottery. I Googled winning the lottery just to find a picture to use in the page. I ended up finding a Cypriot guy, I think, in New York who won $1 million. He was waiting at the bank to open, and he bought a scratch ticket and won $1 million. He got his picture and his name in the New York Post. But imagine all the other people who actually got a scratch ticket and lost. Imagine if newspapers and websites posted pictures of all of us who bought a lottery ticket, and didn't win. Okay, they don't. It's a similar thing with going to the bookstore and see all these biographies of successful people, and they might be inspiring, but these are the biographies of some outliers, of some exceptional cases. You're not going to see my biography if you go to Public or some other bookstore. You're not going to see a Netflix special on someone who didn't really do anything. We can follow the advice of these people. We can be inspired by their stories, but the problem with it is that these people tend to underestimate the x-axis on Schopenhauer's graph. They tend to underestimate how important was the role of luck, of fortune in their success. They tend to attribute their successes to internal factors, and I'll come back to that. Here are some examples of people who were successful or are successful and don't think that luck played a role in it. This is Janet Jackson, this is George Lucas, thinking that there is nothing such as luck. And from a psychology side, it actually makes sense, because we know from something that's called attribution theory that when something happens, we can attribute it either to internal factors like how good we are, our ability, our effort, or to external factors like luck and the difficulty of the task and things like that. And we are a bit biased. We are biased in thinking, in attributing our successes to internal factors, but are failures to external factors. Now, some of you said that you watch football, and I bet after a football game, if you watch any football player talking to the cameras or a coach, if they win, they tend to say things like, oh, we are a very good team, we try really hard, and things like that. These are all internal factors, but when they lose, it's always bad luck, the referees, the other circumstances, or external factors. And every now and then I get a lot of joy when I listen to a coach saying, well, we're not as good team as the other one. You don't get that often, but sometimes it does happen. So it makes sense for successful people to be biased towards their own skills, their own abilities, and downplay the role of failure. But the problem, if you use the successful people to inspire ourselves, we get to mismatch, we get a biased story. So my first tip, because in the title of the presentation, it says something about tips. My first tip is to maybe also look at the people who didn't make it. Look at the people who failed at the tasks they undertook, who failed fulfilling their dreams. The difficulty, of course, is that finding access to these people, you're not going to see them in the media, you're not going to read their biography, but if you know people who started their own businesses, for example, and it didn't work, then talking to them, I think, can give you lots of insights of what could go wrong. So the first tip is to look at the failures as well, not just the successful people. Now, it's a nice thing to try and be successful. Maybe not trying to be rich, although success is equated sometimes with being rich. But we might be doing it for the wrong reasons. We might be doing it because we think it will make us happier if we achieve our goals, if we make a lot of money and things like that. And this is not the case, actually. Let me give you an example of someone. There's two slides in Greek, but I'll translate them. This is a guy who's in the media recently because he's trying to buy a local football club, Omonia Nicosia. His name is John Christodoulou. He's one of the, I think, the top 82 richest people in Britain. He's Cypriot. I don't know him in person, but I kind of like him because he seems to love Cyprus and he seems to be doing charity, and that's both things that I value. But I read an interview of his the other day, and one of the questions was, do you think that money and power, success bring happiness? And his reply was, no, they don't bring happiness. Money can make your life easier, but at the same time, may bring misery if you cannot, what's the word? Handle them. Okay, yes. And he got it right, half right. Research shows that a little bit of money actually brings you happiness. So if you have no money, you are unhappy. So you need some money to fulfill your basic needs and have some security in case something happens. But above a certain amount, it doesn't make any difference to how happy you are. And it differs, the amount differs from country to country and from occupation to occupation. The clergy seem to require less money to be happy. Lawyers seem to require more money, but at around 50,000, if you have 50,000 euros in the bank, you're happy, and it doesn't matter how more you have than that. And the thing is, even for us, we haven't won the lottery, we haven't made a lot of money. If we think about future events, we make a mistake. We think that if something good happens, like winning the lottery, we will be very happy. Okay, but there's research that was done that showed that people who have won the lottery are equally as happy with people who haven't won the lottery, or the other way around would make more sense. So people who haven't won the lottery, they're just as happy. So if you think about it now, if you think about, would you be happy if you happier if you win the lottery? Most of you think yes, right? But if you win the lottery, after a few days, you'll say that you were just as happy as you were before. It's a little bit of a paradox. But the reason is that when we think about events like this in the future, we tend to focus on a couple of things that come to mind. The positive, you might think, oh, I'm going to buy a house, I'm going to travel a lot, I'm going to do all these things. You don't think about the negative things that come with lots of money, thinking about doing the right investment or not, or where you save your money and things like that. It works in other ways. And this is actually has a name. It's called the focusing illusion. It was proposed by a guy called Daniel Kahneman, psychologist who got a Nobel Prize in economics, not for that, for some other work that he did. And he says that when we think about an event happening in the future, either positive or negative, we focus on just a couple of things that come to mind. And there are other things that actually make a difference that we don't think about. Then there's a study he did where he asked people, you can see the question underneath, but it says, are people in California happy? And if you think about how happy you would be if you moved to California, you might bring in mind pictures like this: palm trees, the beach, walking around, biking around, and things like that. And especially in his study, he asked people that were living in Ohio to say how happy they would be if they moved to California. And they all said, oh, we're going to be extremely happy. But then when he asked people who lived in California and people who lived in Ohio how happy they were at the places they were living, they were equally happy. So people in California, people in Ohio are equally happy, but people who are in Ohio think that they would be happier if they moved to California, okay? And that's because they think of the positive things and not the negative things that may come with living in California. And I used to live in California, and I know about the heavy traffic in LA and safety issues that come about with living there. So it's not just palm trees and the beach and all these nice things. So sometimes you don't see the, can I move this? Yeah, okay. So sometimes we think about nice things and we expect things to be fantastic, but in reality, most of the times they're not as good as we expect. So we get a lot of disappointment sometimes from our high expectations. No, I cannot move it. I can move it back. So what we take from here is my next tip is that we shouldn't be worrying much about the future because things won't be as good as we think they will be. If we think about achieving certain things, so if you think about building your own company and making lots of money, and you think that will make you happy, it might increase your happiness, but it's not going to be as great as you imagine it would be. I know it's a little bit of a sad thing to know, but the good thing is that it works the other way around. So if you think about negative things happening to you, they also won't be as bad as you think they are. So if you are, in love right now and you're thinking that it's going to be the end of the world if you break up with your spouse, just know that it's not going to be that bad, okay? It's not going to be as bad as you imagine. Nothing is the end of the world, except the end of the world. So my tip is not to worry much about the events and just live your life. Now, a related question to the previous one is, how can we be happy? Can we do things that would make us happier if money and success won't necessarily do the trick? One of the mistakes we make in our everyday life is that we have desires, we look at things and we want them, and we think that if we have them, it will make us happy. This is called the hedonic treadmill. Was proposed by psychologist Michael Isaac. He says that we see things, we want them, we buy them. So we see the new iPhone 13, I think, and we think, oh, if we have it, we'll be really happy. we buy it, we're happy for a couple of days, but then we adapt. We go back to our baseline of normal happiness or unhappiness, and we want something else. So that's why it's a cycle. It's a treadmill. So it is a bit of a problem because we get anxious when we want to get these things and we can't. So we do our best to satisfy this need. And when we satisfy this need, it doesn't make us any happy. We want something else. So what's the solution to that? Well, one proposed 2,500 years ago by a Greek philosopher called Epicurus, basically said that we maybe shouldn't have lots of desires. Maybe we shouldn't want lots of things. We should be satisfied with what we have, and that would make us happy. Now, the Epicureans were actually like modern hippies. They used to live in a garden. They used to not do a lot of things. We generally associate them with pleasures. We often talk about Epicurean meals, but even for pleasures, they tended to avoid pleasures that will give them some misery later on. So they wouldn't go out drinking because although it's a pleasure, it will bring you hangover the next day. So they were thinking ahead about anything that would cause them pain and would avoid all these things. Now, it's a nice solution. So to avoid things, avoid pain and reach tranquility, what the ancient Greeks called ataraxia. But it's a little bit of a lazy approach. You basically do nothing, you care about nothing, and that will make you relaxed. You are relaxed, of course, but what's the motivation you get to get out of bed in the morning? Now, the philosophers who got it right, I think, were actually the Stoics. And the Stoics, they actually started from a Cypriot guy, this guy from Larnaca, Zeno of Citium was the first Stoicist. So he left Larnaca, went to Athens, and started teaching in the Stoa. And the basic premise of Stoicism is that to divide the things that are under our control and things that are not. And it's like the Schopenhauer figures. You have things, your aims, that this is under your control, but at the same time, you have luck, external events that are outside of your control. So this is a quote from Epictetus. Epictetus was a slave who got his freedom and then became a philosopher. Now, the idea here is that we should worry only about things that are under our control. Don't worry about the rest. And what's under our control is our emotions and our actions, basically our reactions to things that happen. So something happens and we react to it, we feel bad, we feel happy, we do things. These are the things that are under our control. The event itself, it's not something we should worry much about. And if we find the power to regulate our reactions, our emotions to things, then according to Marcus Aurelius, who was a Roman emperor, we should find the tranquility, the happiness that we seek. And this is actually the foundation of modern psychotherapy. So you think about cognitive behavior therapy and the techniques that psychologists use today, they're all about changing how we control our emotions, how we react to events, and they try to break often the cycle of negative thoughts and induce some positivity and change how we interpret events. They're not trying to change the events, they're trying to change how we think about events. So the bottom line is that we should value things, we should try to control things that are under our control and work on them, and don't place much value to things that are external. And I think it's a nice message. And just to relate it to what the class is all about, entrepreneurship, the question is becoming the best entrepreneur or a good entrepreneur something under your control? Is forming a company, a startup, and succeeding, is it something that is entirely in our control? When the answer is no. What is under our control is to get the skills, to educate ourselves, to try really hard, to work hard. These are all things that are under our control, but whether the company succeeds, it's something that is beyond our control. It depends on other things. It depends on luck, first of all. It depends on the idea, whether the others are doing it, whether the others are doing it better than us. So things we can't directly control. So the message here is to try your best, but not worry too much about the success. It might come, it might not. Even if it comes, it's not going to be as good as we think it is. If it's not going to be as bad as we think it is anyways. So here's the next tip to reiterate what I said already, is that we should focus on things that are under our control. We shouldn't get too attached to the outcome of what we try and do. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't have goals, we shouldn't have visions, we shouldn't pursue our goals. But what I'm saying is that while doing it, we shouldn't be too attached to the outcome. We shouldn't be, we should be relaxed about things not working our way, because that's the only way we can attain our happiness and tranquility we might seek. So in other words, we should aim for the best, aim to achieve what we can, but at the same time be prepared for failure, plan for the worst, and that will make us be ready in case things don't go our way, and obviously won't pain us much if we kind of expect that we might fail. Okay. Related to what the Stoics have argued is the fact that in our everyday life, we often overthink things. So something happens and we might have an initial reaction, but then we spend minutes and hours thinking about it and making up stories and even create things in our head for something that doesn't exist. So think about the example of sending a text to someone you're interested in and you don't get a reply, right? What happens is that you might have an initial reaction, but then you start thinking, oh, she doesn't like me, she doesn't want to talk to me, she found someone else, and we make out all these stories about nothing, about literally something that never happened. The other person didn't really do anything. And you can think of all the occasions where you did the same thing. You got a message and you didn't reply because you are busy, you were doing something else, you wanted to reply later, you didn't see the message, you forgot your phone, things like that. But when you judge the behavior of others, you often tend to think of the worst. So one suggestion for remaining calm is to try and not overthink things. Take things as they come. You might have an initial reaction. Try to control the reaction, and don't worry that much about thinking about it. Because sometimes what you overthink might be actually true, and there's nothing you can do about it. And in many cases, you find out later that all the things that you thought didn't really apply. So again, it's pointless. And Seneca, another one of these Stoic philosophers, actually argue that what pains us, what creates pain for us, is never the event, anything that happens, is actually our interpretation of that event. So we suffer more for the things that we think, and not from the reality, from the event itself. So a more general tip is that we often have to think about the problems that we have, that it's okay, we can accept that we do have an issue to deal with, and we'll deal with it, and it's gonna be okay, and we're gonna live our life, and don't start thinking about more than we should. And life definitely happens and goes on about, but it ends. So I'm gonna switch to something more morbid. Does anyone know of this painting? It's actually a painting from the 17th century. Has anyone have seen it? It's something that's called Life with a Skull or something like that. I have it somewhere if I move it. Still Life with a Skull, by a painter called Philippe de Champagne. It was from the 17th century. It shows a tulip, which is a sign for life. It shows the skull, obviously a sign for death, and the hourglass, a sign for the time that goes by. And it's a painting that is meant to remind us of the fact that we're all gonna die. Okay, and it's from a movement that was mainly in the Netherlands in the 17th century called Vanitas. And they were all paintings that in some way aim to remind people of the transience of life, that life is not permanent and that we all gonna die. So in these paintings, if you look it up, you'll see lots of rotten fruit, skeletons and skulls and dying corpses and things like that. But although the paintings themselves are a little bit morbid, their aim again was to remind people that life is short and we should enjoy it. So there is a positive message in these kinds of paintings. This idea was actually proposed a lot earlier by philosophers. And there is something that's called Memento Mori that is quite popular. The legend says that Roman emperors like Marcus Aurelius, when they came back to Rome after fighting a war abroad, and they came victorious back to Rome, and all the crowd was gathering to applaud them and cheer for them. They had a servant up on the vehicle with them, and their task, the servant's task, was to say to the emperor, Memento Mori. Memento Mori means that remember, you're gonna die. Okay, and that saying, the point was that the emperor should be humble, should remain humble, and don't get too carried away about all his successes. And remembering that you're not permanent in life, actually, it's actually useful for two things. It makes you try and enjoy what you can, but at the same time, it makes you humble. You're not different than anyone else. All of us are going to die. So this might be a little bit morbid, reminding yourself that you're gonna die. That Memento Mori is actually my desktop background. I like to be reminded that I will be died. If you think about it in a less morbid way, you might think that every moment that you live, every second of your life is not coming back. So we should regard all those seconds as precious things, and we shouldn't let them go to waste. So if Memento Mori is too dark and morbid for you, you can think of the other side of the coin, which is Memento Vivere, which means remember to live. And I think if you remember that you're gonna die, serves as a good reminder for us to live every moment. So my final tip is that we should take our time to enjoy every moment of our life. Leave your phone behind, leave all the distractions sometimes, and just focus on the moment. We tend to do things, we walk around, we sit at cafes, and we tend to think about other things that are not there. And it's sometimes nice to be like animals, to just focus on what is out there and not think about things for some periods of a day. There is a great, there's increasing popularity for techniques like mindfulness or other types of meditations that aim to bring people into the moment and make people live nicely every moment of the life. But I leave mindfulness for another occasion, I guess, and I can stop here. I can thank you for listening, but at the same time, I want to see what your thoughts are on all these things that I've presented. Thank you very much. Have I convinced anyone to think about the Stoic approach to things and away from positive thinking? Yeah?
Because I had an injury in my knee and I'm it down. And before I was more mindful and I was doing the mindful tricks, I was in program and I forgot it. Okay. So now I don't know. I think I unlocked my mind now to do it again.
Okay, that's nice. I sympathize with you. I spent all summer on crutches because I've done ACL surgery on my knee, and I was out for like 2-3 months. And although every now and then I would think about everyone being at the beach and me being at home, I had to couldn't even sit for most of the time. Then I started thinking about all the nice things that came with it, and made me realize that it wasn't that bad of an experience. So I could read stuff. Nobody would ask me to go anywhere shopping or anything that I don't like. So it was a nice time of being relaxed despite all the hardships that come with the surgery. So I totally get what you're saying. Yes.
If you are in this state that you don't really worry about the future, what's your motive?
Yeah, so I was trying to clarify that I don't mean that we shouldn't have motivation to do things. Now, the Stoics, the difference between the Epicureans and the Stoics is that the Stoics were actually successful people. So they all had nice jobs. One of them was an emperor, but others were merchants. Some of them were quite rich. So they obviously had motivations to do things. The key was, though, that they aimed to achieve certain things, but they weren't too attached on the outcome. They said, for example, okay, I'm going to start this company and I think it's going to work. But at the back of their heads, they would say, okay, but if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter that much. I will still be happy. Okay, so it's a more relaxed approach to the outcome, not to the actual motivation of doing things. The Epicureans were more laid back and sit around and drink and eat. This what? Say that again? Yeah. So if you pitch the idea to an investor and say, I'm doing this, but I don't really care if it works, yeah, it does decrease your chances. So you might want to believe it, but at the same time, not say it out loud to where it matters. But I mean, even believing it, I think it's nice to believe that you can be good at and that you can achieve something. But what I'm saying is that you shouldn't get too attached on the outcome on something that is beyond your control. Okay? But yeah, sometimes we have to be diplomatic when we express what we really believe. Yeah.
But the other thing I wanted to ask, is it good to have ups and lows? I mean, if it's always constant, you don't really know if you're happy or not happy. Or you need something bad, that feel good afterwards.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So, Kahneman, that I talked about, the guy who got a Nobel Prize, argued that when we think about past events, what matters is this different peaks in the event. So if you go on a holiday, for example, doesn't matter how long you stayed, but what matters is that if you had a couple of days that you did something extraordinary that remains in your mind, and also the end. The end is quite important. We tend to remember the end of the events that happened, good or good or bad. It's called the peak and the rule. So remember the peaks and the ends. So it's all about not having, maybe having some baseline, but then you have these peaks that go above the baseline, and these are the ones that define how happy you are. So one idea is maybe have a low baseline, so have low expectations, and anything that happens is actually a good thing. Any other thoughts? Yes. Say that again, I didn't hear you.
How we can measure happiness?
That's a really good question. I mean, the first thing is to define happiness, and it's not clear exactly what it is. The ancients believed in the word they used was ataraxia, which is more like tranquility. So they equated happiness with just being relaxed and don't have worries and things like that. And to me, I think it's a good definition now. Whether it's exactly the same as happiness the way we use it in modern life, I don't know. Now, measuring it in psychology, we tend to measure it with questionnaires, which create a problem. Is because you answer a questionnaire about events that happen, you're using your memory about the events, and your memory about events is biased. Like the thing I said about the vacation, you don't remember everything, you just remember things that stand out in the end. But at the end of the day, these are, according to many researchers, when we judge whether we're happy or not, we just think about our past life, and we see if certain good things come to mind, and then we answer at the question and we say, yeah, we're happy. Not the best way, but it's quite subjective. But then happiness seems quite subjective too. I don't know. We generally don't. That's why I tried in the presentation to talk a little bit about, being rich. For some people, they tend to confound being rich with being happy, or being successful with being happy. So I basically tried to say what happiness isn't, what the things that won't bring you happiness, although we believe they would do. But I don't know if you can break it down in categories further than that. I think it's more of a general feeling that we get about how content we are with what we have achieved ourselves. Some people think that, and I tend to agree, is that when we go on about our lives, we basically build a story about us that we update. So we'll say, okay, I'm Marios, I've managed to get a job at the university, and I'm going to the football game every weekend, and I have a good time. And if I sum it up, I say, okay, that sounds good, and I am happy. And you update. If something bad happens, you say, oh, I'm a loser, I made this. So maybe it's this story we make about ourselves that changes based on the events that we evaluate, and then come to the conclusion of whether we're happy or not. Andrea.
But the concept of happiness changed with age, how you perceive it.
Yeah, I don't know. Lots of things change with age. And it changes whether we are happy. So many older people are happier, report that they are happier. The reason is that they are, and we are closer to death. So people above 40 start thinking about death more frequently than others. But although it sounds like a bad thing, it actually makes them happier because they realize that the life is ending, so I should do stuff, and I will focus on things that matter.
Why do we have some people?
We have what? Grumpy old people.
Grumpy old people.
There's always exceptions. Yeah. For me, just to give you an example from my life, is that I used to worry a lot. I used to think about the mundane things of everyday life, and I will be anxious about whether something will happen or not. And by getting older, I realized that it doesn't matter much. So, yeah, it doesn't matter if I publish another paper or not, or if I get a little bit more money or not. I will be the same person. But I realized it after lots of experiences of trying to do things and failing and seeing that it didn't make a difference, or succeeding and realizing that it didn't make a difference. And when you put that along with the fact that, okay, I'm going to die at some point, then you realize that what's the point of worrying about things? Yeah. Hang on.
We have three questions. Yeah.
Okay.
One from Kostas Takaridis.
Uh-huh.
Do you know any research associating the equivalent of Stoic philosophy of organization creativity? The example of all the recent tech companies and innovations, the workers for their employees, gyms, relaxing areas, etc. Something nice.
Well, there's a lot of research on popular techniques like mindfulness and how they affect well-being, and companies are interested in that. Big companies, so I know lots of the big companies, even in Cyprus, they do invest on trying to increase the well-being of our employees. Now, whether they actually mean it or whether they want to put out the image of caring about their employees, I don't know. But yeah, there is a lot of research on all these techniques for improving well-being or inducing happiness. And some of them work. In mindfulness have been shown to actually help in many things.
Also, very good. That he always suspected that you are a Stoic.
I'm a Stoic. Well, the problem, he should have said that earlier, because I discovered Stoicism. I started reading the ancient philosophers only recently. Some of the things that I came to realize on my own through my experiences, and then realized that some people 2,000 years ago have said the same things, which on the one hand made me feel like the things that I was thinking about was not totally off, but at the same time I realized that I wasn't that original, but it doesn't make a difference. So one of the things that I do, that I started doing on my own, is that I live near the old campus of the university, and there's a cemetery almost next to my house. And there are two routes that I can take to work. And if if I'm a bit down that day, I take the route through the cemetery, and just looking at the cemetery and realizing that I'm gonna die makes me realize that the issues that are in my head that bother me are not that important. Okay, when I am experiencing the last day of my life, sitting in a bed, hopefully somewhere many years from now, and thinking about my life, I wouldn't think about, oh, I should have published another paper, right? Or I should have 1,000 euros more. I would think about traveling, I think, and things like that. There's research on what people who are dying think about, and they're not about money, they're not about success, they're all about experience. So, so I started doing this, going by the cemetery, only to find out later that at many occasions in history, some other people were doing the same thing. There is a tribe, the Sufi Muslims, that used to go to the cemetery just to get a reminder about death. And then the Stoics were, and the Romans were talking about Memento mori and things like that, which is exactly the same idea. But I came to the practice of going by the cemetery on my own. Later on, I found out that other people were doing it. So I think I was a Stoic from some point on, but I didn't even know myself. Yes.
Can we measure happiness with how often we smile? Smile from inside.
Yes, smile from inside is a little bit difficult to see. I don't know. You think people who don't smile might be sad all the time? Maybe they're not expressive enough. Yeah, I don't know, but it's possible. I know that there are some scientists who actually believe that when you try to smile on purpose, so you can actually induce a mode of happiness. So they encourage people to go up to the mirror in the morning and smile to themselves, and I've done it a couple of times. Actually works, makes me feel better. So maybe you can find ways to get more objective measures of happiness. There are lots of facial recognition software now, not emotional recognition software now, and so that could be one cool research project. If you measure the smiles from people without knowing that you're doing it, and see if their responses correlate with the ratings of happiness in a questionnaire, that could be a nice but difficult research to do. Yeah, go ahead.
But how easy is to adapt this mindset, because people will tend to want to be more optimistic, and that's why people keep buying or keeping the law of attraction for being optimistic and these things, because we want the thing of achievement, the dopamine release, and all these things.
Yeah.
How is it to adapt to this mindset?
Well, it's not easy to adapt. I often find myself, worrying about things, and then I try volitionally to stop myself. So it's not easy. So that's why some people need to actually go to therapy to get help on how to think like that. But the optimistic mindset, I'm not sure if I like that. I prefer a more what's often called strategic pessimism than being optimist. And in psychology, if you go a little bit back to famous psychologists, if you go back to Freud wasn't trying to make people happy. So he was not trying to restore happiness. He was trying to restore normal unhappiness. So he thought the baseline was to be unhappy, and there were people that were abnormally unhappy, and he was trying to make them normally unhappy, which is a pessimistic view like the one by Schopenhauer. So strategic pessimism is basically thinking that things might not end up well. If they do, you're happier, right? And if they don't, you are prepared for it. So maybe there is some value at having low expectations sometimes.
Sometimes a lot of practice, because I see my friends or more grown up that they do I think it's writing or believing that if you want something, the universe will give you.
Yeah. Does it work for them?
Yes. I don't know how.
No.
I think they change their perception, and that's why they are more happy.
Okay. I don't think it works. I think you just notice the instances that work. It's like going to the supermarket, and we often, waiting to pay, and we see the other line moving, and we think, oh, whatever line I choose, the other one's moving. It's because we notice the few cases that it happens. We don't notice or think about all the other times we go to the supermarket and we go to the line and it moves just fine. So we notice the abnormalities, and sometimes we see the abnormalities is actually the norm. So I think you are just noticing the times that your friends wanted something and it happened, but you don't get to notice all the other things that it didn't happen.
About that, about their happiness and how they view themselves.
Okay.
They didn't achieve much, but I saw that they're feeling better. So
Right. Well, if it's the feeling better, and then that's good for them. So don't ruin it for them. Don't say anything about Stoicism. But for me, I mean, if I see quotes like the one by Paulo Coelho, I think of all the times that I wanted something and the universe didn't do it, right? And then I think, why should I believe this thing? It doesn't work. Yeah.
He's right used to why
I agree with you.
also follow is a writer one.
Yeah. I agree with this, and I get frustrated when I go to bookstores and go to the psychology section, and it's all these pop psychology books that are all about self-help and achieving this and positive thinking and all that stuff, because I don't really believe in that stuff. But yeah, and there are many cases that it has been proven that authors were arguing things that there was no scientific basis for it, and some people sold millions of copies of the books of something that is not scientifically valid.
I read it, although I was cringing
Which one?
about it, the secret law.
Ah, okay.
I was cringing about it because it's not realistic, but they use things from cognitive psychology in order to achieve these things and be so popular.
I didn't read it, but I read critiques of it, and they were very, very harsh from people that I trust, like established scientists. And I mean, you can use facts from psychology and neuroscience and present them in a way that makes it believable to people who don't know.
Not using facts, they're using strategies in order to sell buyers.
Ah, okay,
That's what they do mostly. So they use the strategies and they sell, so that's why people can buy.
Yeah. It's sad. Yeah, you know, I mean, it sells if you have a positive message, right? You write a book and it's called "Life is Shit." Who's gonna buy it, right? Or you know, don't expect much from life, right? Something like that. People won't buy it. Yeah. Yes, sir. I have plenty of time.
So Maria, for you, is asking, how do you think that the university should help students develop this type of thinking?
Okay.
So they will not feel the failure and thus be depressed and demotivated.
Okay. Maria Fodio is my PhD student, so I thought she would ask if I read her thesis, the draft of her thesis. I haven't finished it, Maria. I'm working on it. I don't know. I mean, it's up to the university to organize events like this and bring people that see things from all the various perspectives, because this is my perspective. Obviously, there are others. So the Center of Entrepreneurship is doing it. So that's the way. Yeah. Yeah.
The dynamical lab is a kind of choices, but sometimes in your mind the line is blurry regarding what you can control and what not. For example, how can you differentiate from something that is out of your control and distinguish it from the I am not trying enough?
Yeah.
To reach the goal?
Yeah, there's definitely gray areas and blurry lines. I agree with Konstantina. Um, no. So, well, it's quite subjective to know what things are under your control. In general terms, it's your actions and your feelings about things. So the emotional reactions to events. Trying harder is part of that. Is an action, so I would consider it as an internal thing. But most of the things that we do are actually a combination of things we can control and things we cannot control. You think about football, I get to, as I said, I'm involved in a team, and I often hear the coach talking to the players and saying, "Oh, we really need to win this game, or so we should definitely win. If we don't win, it will be a disaster," things like that. And I'm thinking, winning is not something that is under any player's control, because you can try your best, you can have all the strategies, you can have the best skills, and then play against, Bayern Munich, and they're gonna beat you, and no matter how hard you try. And so winning is an external event. Doing your best, putting your effort and doing the best is under your control. So it's sometimes it's difficult, and just because most of the tasks we do in life combine things that we can control and things we cannot control. Yeah.
Emily Hay.
Mhm.
Yes, he makes typing a strong spirit, very in various ways, possible related. And being an outlier that doesn't stress the way through life is a whole job on its own, she says. How
Yeah.
do you inspire your kids to follow this way of thinking?
I talk to them about things like that, and some people think I'm boring without drinking a beer and talking about death. But I don't try on purpose to impose my views on other people. I just talk with my friends and try to explain the things that the way I see things, and if it works for them, it works for them. But yeah, I agree with Emily that it's tough being relaxed. Yeah, and the more you think about it, being relaxed makes you more anxious, so makes you less relaxed. Yeah, I drink as well, so sometimes it's yeah.
We are alone. For example, we are like independent beings in the world.
No, we're very social people, and
But we make our strategic.
yeah. Also, I mean, strategic pessimism, I think, is one strategy, but I won't say we're alone. We're social, and most of the things we do, we actually do for the others. We don't do for ourselves, right? Even if you believe that you're not one of those people that tries to impress others and does things for others, you do things for others. You do care what other people think. Does anyone here think that they don't care about what other people think about them? You don't care about what people think about, right? You care, okay. Because then I would ask you, if you care, why didn't you show up here naked, right? You put clothes on. You obviously care to fit in and don't be the weird looking guy, well, weird naked guy going about the campus, right? So even things like that show that in some way, even if we don't care that much about what other people say, we do care somewhat. But it's an important issue, not caring about the others. What the others believe is an external event. So if we agree with Stoicism, then we should try not to care much about what others think about us. And also they generally don't think about us or care about us as much as we think they do. So that's another reason for not caring much about what they think. We conform, yeah. That's why I said that we are social people. We conform to situations, and imagine if something happened. This is an example that I've read from some psychologist somewhere. Imagine that something happens tonight, and you wake up and you find that everyone else is gone. So all the people were abducted by aliens or something, and all the animals are gone, and everything else remains the same. So the stores are open, the cars are there with the keys on, and everything. What would you do? You might spend an hour or two driving a Tesla around or doing something that you like, but would you actually go and get clothes from a store and wear nice clothes outside, or dress up, or
Why didn't you?
yeah.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah, so feeling rejected even in that way. So and that shows that what we do in everyday life is actually we do it for the others, not for ourselves. If there was nobody around, we wouldn't care much about anything. Any other thoughts? I want to hear your thoughts, actually. So these are things I've been thinking about quite often, and I change my mind about things all the time. Yeah. What I'm doing exactly with football. And so you mean about the team, I said, or about the company? The team, I'm in the board of the CYENS Centre. The team now in the third division. We're in the top spot though, so maybe we're going back to the second division. So what I do is that I go to the matches. The away matches are really nice. You learn about the villages and nice taverns around Cyprus. So that's a nice thing about being in a lower division. The company I'm involved in is called Mentis VR. It's a company that does training using virtual reality for goalkeepers. So we have some apps for goalkeepers aimed to improve their cognitive skills, mainly attention and perception, which is my main research interest. And so it's a private company, and we only have one client, Aris Limassol, which is doing very well. So it's a good thing for us, and the goalkeeper is fantastic. So there is the only team, and the CYENS is using it, but Aris is using the high-end version that they paid for. And we work on that. We work with players and some teams. Yeah. Are you into football? Are you doing anything related?
No, I only like
To bet. Okay. No, no things about that. Yeah.
that question. Being the only naked guy in the room makes you feel bad. I mean, I don't want this because it makes me feel bad. Not because I care what they will think about me, if I'm crazy or not.
Why would you think bad about being naked? I can understand some drawbacks. Where do you put your hands, right? You don't have pockets. You cannot do this and that. So I can see the difficulties. But why would you feel bad about being naked? But if it was nobody here, would you feel ashamed of your body?
I don't like
Even without, you're at home and there's nobody.
standard. If it's below the standard, I'm ashamed. Below the standard.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Okay. I'm not saying that everybody does everything for the others. Yeah.
I was thinking about it.
Yeah. Yes.
It wasn't indica.
Yes.
And some people were doing it. Some of us may agree with
Yeah. Sure. I mean, it was some serious problems, right? I'm red-green colorblind, so I often find difficulty matching things to wear. Being naked would actually solve that issue, right? I wouldn't worry much about what to wear in the morning, but then it will get cold. So yeah. If anyone wants to work in science, we have positions open. The director is leaving, but yeah.
We have a question from Lucy and Maybe.
My sister, I haven't seen her for a long time. She's in the Netherlands. That's why it's not that I don't like my family.
Okay, she cannot put the video.
That's fine.
Can I read the question? Is it possible that Stoicism at this place time is actually a neoliberal trend that does more harm than good, in the sense that it supports the superficial feeling of being content with societies that have become increasingly competitive? I mean, I don't understand anything.
No, my sister is smart, after all.
And she's introducing, I am Mario's sister, and I'm allowed to pose over the critical question.
Yeah, it's actually a criticism of Stoicism in general. Is that
Is she a psychologist?
no, she's not. I don't know what she does.
Sociology.
She's a science education, something like that. But she's a professor at Groningen. She's she actually raised a good point. One of the criticism of Stoicism is that if we don't care about many things, then how do we contribute to society? How do we change things in society that we don't like? So, and many changes in public policy have resulted from people opposing to things, and based on Stoicism, we wouldn't really care, and that's a very valid critique. Being part of social of society sometimes entails that we care about things that are outside our control and things that we should care if we want the good for society. So maybe Stoicism is a little bit egoistic in that sense.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean I like Stoicism, but I don't agree with everything it says. One is this about not being that part of a society. The other thing is that there are certain bad events that we will definitely react to them. And people like Epictetus, he was actually, if you read his book, he was saying that if you lose a child, then you shouldn't think about it as a very bad thing. You should think about it as you let it go away, something like that. And that's kind of hard for anyone to agree with. I mean, if you lose someone that's very close to you, you're gonna be sad, and you should be sad because you have to experience these emotions to feel good again after some time. And Epictetus was encouraging people not to think about it as someone dying, but as it's not yours. You had the child, it was given to you, and now you give it back. And that's mentality that doesn't really work with me.
That's why I ask you to must maintain an independent living state of mind, be happy.
Yeah. Well, if you don't care about anything, then I think you are, in a sense, happy. But maybe the others are not very happy with having you around, right? Yeah. Yeah.
I can share the book about the happy and the food.
Uh-huh.
And I consider we are going from one end
like not useful for surviving.
Mm-hmm.
Like for us a shift of perspective, like happening is not a mindful. Like we are living moments of time,
Yeah.
or we are reaching successful goal end. But we need acceptance that we are focusing on the journey also.
Yeah.
My policy, I don't know. But I think it's also redefining the concept.
Yeah.
Experiencing moment of happiness.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. That's what I was trying to say about the thing about the stories, that you think about your life and you think about, did I have enough moments of happiness in my life? And you think you have your good share of moments of happiness, you might draw the final conclusion that you are happy. Okay. But I agree that it's all about remembering past events and realizing that you have some happy moments in it. So happiness is not a continuous thing; it's just moments of happy and moments of sad. Yeah, right. Uh-huh.
I realized like more than 20 times.
I did.
It's like a transition.
I didn't realize that, 21.
So it's about a transition to becoming a real.
Yeah.
Other being
Uh-huh.
how to uphold reality.
Yeah.
Go back then.
Yeah, I get it. I agree. Yeah. Someone said about happiness that we think about happiness too much, and someone said that happiness is like an orgasm. The more you think about it, the more it goes away. So maybe we shouldn't talk much about being happy and just live our life with not thinking much about the pain and the difficulties. And Schopenhauer was arguing that what makes us unhappy is pain and boredom. I tend to agree. So if we avoid things that cause harm to us, at the same time have motivation because then we are bored, then we should be okay. Yeah.
I don't know if you know something about it, and we're just curious about it. I think that somebody said that sometimes our brains are wired to look for the like we are like just looking for the unknown. I don't know something, I must go find it. And I feel I'm like our destiny to be looking for
The answers. Yeah. I don't know of any research that looked at that, but I think most of us are curious beings. So we try to understand the things that don't understand.
Not like not happy. We are always like looking ourselves to get.
Yeah.
It's like a destiny that we cannot get out of it. Like
yeah. And things are getting worse, aren't they? With like in modern society, with social media and things, we get to see what others are getting and doing, and that increases our needs. So I think things are getting worse. But I don't know, the original question is that I know research that actually shows that we are looking for the missing. I don't know. That's the honest answer about that. Kind of hard to do this kind of research. Can't even think about how I would go on about researching this. Yeah.
But unfortunately, to how we,
I know. We all.
I saw that people that live here in the city are more unhappy because they are living less mindfulness, like because they are high risk here, and they forget to live moments of happiness because they are worried because of the work, to be better than the other. But people are there at the house. Yes.
Ah, okay.
They are,
More relaxed, more.
yes, because they go to eat, they go to work, they don't
Yeah.
have this high risk, and I think they're more mindful because of the place they live.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people that their dream for the future is just to retire and go have a farm somewhere in a village or up in the mountains or by the sea. And I totally get that. I often dream about this too because I mean, it's in line with the things I've been saying that you try to avoid all these things that will cause you pain and anxiety. And if you live in the city and you're 24 hours in a higher rhythm trying to do things, then that's tiring. And I kind of like the more relaxing life of villagers. Although I've never been to one other than for vacation, it makes it a little bit different. So, but yeah. So you're gonna stay there, it's about.
I don't know, sometimes I want to be here because I like to achieve things. I have some high goals, but sometimes I can't see myself what I would prefer to harsh my mental health and live in a high rhythm, or to be more relaxed and do things in my own way and have a more
I'm with you in that. I studied in the States and I worked there. I worked in Germany for a little bit, and when I came back to Cyprus, people were asking me why do you go back there? I used to be at better universities than the University of Cyprus, and then send them a picture of the beach, and I said, this is what matters, being happy. It doesn't matter if I'm a better university and do better research. I'm gonna die, right? At some point, I might as well enjoy the interval. Yeah.
Thanks, Mario.
Guys, thank you very much. It was a nice discussion. Thanks to the people on Zoom listening, and good night.